there's water coming. There's water.
It was a wartime housing project. It was built by Henry J. Kaiser. Well, he was instrumental in having it built. The Housing Authority of Portland, because Henry J. Kaiser had all these shipyards here, 3 shipyards in the northwest area, St. John's, Vancouver, and also Swan Island. And Vanport got its name from the fact that in the early stages when it was being built, it was called the Denver Avenue Housing Project. Afterwards, they called it Kaiserville. Well, the city of Portland said you can't call it Kaiserville because Henry J. Kaiser is still alive. And the ordinance says you can't name a town after someone who's still alive. So they decided to rename it to Vanport. Vancouver, Portland, truncated together. And that's how it came to be. It was a temporary housing project. It was built with federal funds. It was supposed to house wartime residents who came to Portland to work in the shipyards, to work in any defense industry. And it was a very vital community. There were people who came in and out all the time. It was very young. Nobody owned any land. Nobody owned any property in Vanport. It was built in a year's time. And the housing contained, they were 2-story buildings, and they were already furnished, so all people had to do was bring in their personal belongings, and they had a little place where they could cook their meals. Very small apartments though, very efficiency apartments. And so people lived in there. One of the things is that it was supposed to be temporary, so they had, when they built it, they had in mind that it was going to be temporary and it was going to be taken down after the war's end. But what happened was after the war, it was repurposed. Vanport got repurposed. So part of Vanport became Veterans Village, and it became a place where people who were on the GI Bill could come and study in the Vanport Extension Center, which was the precursor to Portland State University.
I am one of the survivors of the Vanport flood. It is with great appreciation that I am delighted to read so many articles or attend events that speak about a city so forgotten. I feel that this awakening of Vanport has caused people to take a look at this lost city, wanting to be educated historically, and listen with great anticipation the stories of those that helped write the pages of history in Vanport. So, I have learned that every story told is important. Every encountered share helps to make the puzzle complete. And that is why I share my piece willingly. There is a passage in the Bible that helps my story be told with an understanding. In 1 Corinthians 13:11, it says, "When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. But when I became a man, I put away all childish things." So when the flood occurred, I was 7.5 years of age. My family consisted of 8 siblings and my parents. Fortunately, we were not at home when the flood happened. Upon our return, we dealt with the fact that we had no home to return to. The only thing I could think of was my doll that was somewhere in the water and the slice of chocolate cake I didn't get to eat. I had no understanding why my mother was so angry with me as I wept over my doll and the cake. After all, I was only 7. It's amazing because a few years ago, I realized that not only were we homeless, we were abandoned in a sense from our parents, never separated from them. And now we're staying in 3 different places without our parents. And in the morning, we would have to put the same clothes back on again. I was not old enough to understand the importance of losing documents, birth certificates, pictures, all of our belongings. All we had was one another. One thing I know for a fact is we as kids were sheltered from all things that brought us to Vanport. The lifestyle of the city, a place that was thrown together so fast. It took the people living there to make it at home. Even hope in the midst of fear, war, poverty, and racism. The stories at 76 years old have given me a sense of pride that at 7, I just didn't comprehend. When I think now of Vanport, I am persuaded that there was a sense of pride that taught us how to move forward and not get stuck on ignorance amidst all the oppositions we encountered. I am very blessed that my eyesight of seeing things at the tender age of 7 was locked into my memory. It was not tarnished by the chaos that occurred Sunday, May the 30th, 1948. Although as survivors of Vanport, we don't have a color that identifies the nature of our experience, what we do have is a song in our hearts that can all blend our voices harmoniously and sing, even though the songs might be different, we yet have one thing in common. We are all survivors of the Vanport flood.
The black kids live on the other side of the river. They commit crimes. This is what my 4th grade teacher taught our class in Southwest Portland. As the only black child in a room, I remained silent, apologizing for behavior I had never done. This was as close to learning about African Americans in Portland as I would come. As a child of immigrants growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood, I was force-fed an untrue story, and shame was sowed early into my identity. Learning about Vanport now has been akin to an adopted child finding a piece of their true identity. I have a story. It was 4:17 on May 30th, 1948, when the dike collapsed. African Americans and whites rushed out of Vanport as the water levels rose. And one day, the second largest city in Oregon was destroyed. But it was a city built on a floodplain. African Americans in search of a better life in the Northwest were relegated to live in the most dangerous area. This has taught me the implications of structural racism, that beyond working hard, there must be a change at policy level to advocate for equality for African Americans. The day of the flood, the Housing Authority of Portland told Vanport, "Dikes are safe at present, don't get excited." The sirens only went off 30 minutes before the city began to be buried by water. This has taught me that lies are a form of mental oppression. The lies I was handed in 4th grade were a continuation of a long legacy of misleading minorities to stunt their advancement. The story of Vanport has taught me not to accept all words as truth and seek out primary sources for true information. After the flood waters erased Vanport, there was a second cover-up. The event was erased from Oregon history books. I remember learning about the Oregon Trail, Lewis and Clark, and Multnomah Indians, but I never heard of Vanport. I played soccer at Delta Park, not knowing I was kicking a ball next to a gravesite. Portland State handed me a degree with honors and never taught me that the school was originally founded as Vanport College and originally located in the area that was washed away 69 years ago. This has taught me that history is his story. And as an African American female, my story is easily washed away. I have to record it to tell others about Vanport. I now live on a house on a hill, a recipient of the benefits of another generation's fight against oppression. My daughter is 5 and has just started kindergarten. When she reaches 4th grade, she will be prepared. When the teacher begins her Oregon history lesson, she will rise, head held high, and tell the teacher she would like to give a presentation on Vanport, the story of some of the first African American settlers in Portland, how hard they worked, the college that was built, and the flood that destroyed their homes. The story of Vanport. She will teach them her story.
And of course, we couldn't have done any of this without the really support of our sponsor, the newest place, Portland, right on MLK, called Sweet James. I hope everyone gets a chance to come. And lastly, I want to thank our major sponsor, is the Oregon Lottery. It does good things. Thank you, Oregon Lottery, and thanks everybody for coming.